2 o'clock in the morning, August 20th, 1901. 300 black people running through cornfields in Pierce City, Missouri. Mothers carrying babies. Children crying in the darkness. Gunshots behind them. The sound of their homes burning. 5 houses in flames lighting up the night sky, orange and red. Springfield rifles stolen from the armory, firing into windows. Glass shattering. Wood cracking in the heat. Behind them, 1,000 white men with torches and weapons hunting them like animals. And 15 hours earlier, this was a thriving community. 30 black families owned land. They had homes. They had futures. By sunrise, every single black person was gone. Not one remained. An entire community erased in one night. 30 acres of farmland stolen. 10 city lots taken. $30 million in today's money vanished. And for 100 years, this wasn't in a single history book. Not one textbook mentioned it. 3 generations grew up never knowing it happened. Until right now. You need to hear what happened in Pierce City, because everything you learned about American history was edited. They cut out the parts that mattered most. They removed the stories that would make you understand why the wealth gap exists today. Why your family rents instead of owns. Why entire black communities disappeared from maps. Pierce City wasn't unique. It wasn't isolated. It was the blueprint. Between 1894 and 1909, 40,000 black people were expelled from the Missouri Ozarks. 40,000. That's ethnic cleansing. That's genocide. And nobody taught you this in school. By the end of this video, you will know the names of the warriors who refused to surrender that night. French Godley, 70 years old. Pete Hampton, 30 years old. Will Godley, 32 years old, lynched and later proven completely innocent. You will know the exact wealth that was stolen. 30 acres of farmland. 10 city lots valued at over $30 million today. You will understand how they made it legal. The systematic mechanisms from lynching to property theft, to creating sundown towns that turned Missouri white. You will learn why Pierce City stayed all white until the 1960s. 60 years of enforced racial cleansing. And you will see how this connects to your life right now, today, this minute. Why the black-white wealth gap isn't your failure. It's stolen inheritance. If your family fled Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas, or the Ozarks between 1890 and 1920, this is why. This isn't ancient history gathering dust in archives. Your grandparents lived through sundown towns. Your great-grandparents may have fled Pierce City that night. The wealth they stole would be in your bank account today. After this video, you'll never look at gentrification the same way. You'll never hear about police brutality without connecting it. You'll never accept the lie that black people just need to work harder. Because you'll know the truth. They didn't outwork us. They robbed us at gunpoint and called it legal. Let me take you back to Pierce City in 1900. Picture a thriving town. 3,000 people. 2 banks. 10 churches. An opera house. Baptist Bible College opened in 1878. This wasn't some backward rural outpost. This was prosperity, industry booming, lime production, pottery manufacturing, a brewery, strawberry shipping center. People came from Germany, Ireland, Poland, and yes, Africa. They built lives together. They worked side by side. And among those 3,000 residents were 30 black families, nearly 300 people. They weren't just surviving in Pierce City. They were thriving. These families owned 30 acres of agricultural land, rich Missouri farmland that grew crops and produced income. They owned 10 city lots with houses, solid homes. Some had small businesses. They had a black church where the community gathered every Sunday, where they prayed and organized and celebrated, where they baptized babies and married young couples and buried their elders. This was the golden age of black business across America. Between 1900 and 1930, 20,000 black-owned businesses existed nationwide. Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Rosewood in Florida, and yes, Black prosperity in Pierce City, Missouri. Think about what this means. 35 years after slavery ended, these families owned property. One generation from chains to landowners. One generation from being classified as property to owning property. Your ancestors weren't helpless. They weren't waiting for white saviors. They built wealth from absolutely nothing in the most hostile environment imaginable. While facing the Ku Klux Klan, while facing Jim Crow, while facing daily humiliation and constant threat of violence. And they still accumulated 30 acres. They still bought 10 lots. They still raised children who went to school and church and dreamed of futures. That's who lived in Pierce City. That's what existed on August 18, 1901. Prosperity, progress, community, hope. Then everything shattered in 24 hours. August 18, 1901, Sunday evening, Gazelle Wild. 23-year-old white woman found dead behind a church, murdered. The town panicked, and immediately, without investigation, without evidence, without a single witness, they blamed Will Godley. 32-year-old black man, arrested him on the spot, threw him in the Pierce City jail. No lawyer, no trial, no due process, just accusation and arrest. That's all it took. You need to understand something about that era, about how these massacres always started. They needed an excuse, a justification, a story they could tell themselves and the world. And the story was always the same. Black man accused of assaulting white woman. It didn't matter if it was true. Truth was irrelevant. The accusation itself was the weapon, the match that lit the fire. And everyone knew exactly what came next. By evening on August 18th, the mob formed. Over 1,000 white men gathered in Pierce City. They didn't hide their faces. They didn't wear hoods. They were proud. This was community bonding for them. Righteous anger, they called it. Defending white womanhood, they said. They broke into the local armory and stole Springfield rifles, military weapons. They cleaned out hardware stores, buying every bullet, every shotgun shell in town. And when black residents tried to buy weapons to defend themselves, store owners refused. Sold out, they said. Nothing left, they lied. 1,000 armed white men against 300 black civilians. Men, women, children, elderly. Most unarmed. Those who had hunting rifles knew they were outnumbered 10 to 1, 20 to 1. This wasn't a fight. This was a hunt. The mob dragged Will Godley from his cell. They didn't wait for trial. They didn't wait for evidence. They became judge, jury, and executioner in one night. They tortured him, demanded he confess. Will Godley refused. Even under torture, even facing death, he refused to confess to a crime he didn't commit. So they lynched him, hanged him until he died. Then they shot his body full of bullets, made sure he was dead, made sure everyone saw. They left his body hanging as a message, as a warning. This is what happens when you're black in Pierce City. But here's what they didn't teach you in history class. Here's what matters. Years later, another man named Stark was identified as the likely actual killer. Will Godley died innocent. Completely innocent. Murdered for being black in the wrong place at the wrong time. Murdered because they needed someone to blame, and he was available. And nobody was ever punished for killing him. Not one arrest. Not one trial. Not one consequence. Pause and think about that. An innocent man tortured and lynched, and his murderers walked free, celebrated even. That's not ancient history. That's 1901. That's your great-grandparents' lifetime. That's the foundation of the justice system we still have today. But Will Godley's murder, was just the beginning. That was the spark. What came next was the inferno. After they killed Will, the mob didn't go home. They weren't satisfied. This was never about justice for Gazelle Wild. This was about terror. This was about sending a message to every black person in Pierce City. You're not safe here. You're not wanted here. Leave or die. The mob marched to the home of French Godley, Will's father, 70 years old. 70. An old man who had survived slavery, who had built a life over decades in Pierce City, who owned land and a home, who thought he had finally found something resembling safety. And that night, 1,000 torches surrounded his house. French Godley wasn't alone. His stepson Pete Hampton stood with him. Pete was about 30 years old, young, strong, fast. He could have run. He could have escaped through the back, through the fields into the night. He might have made it, but Pete Hampton looked at his 70-year-old stepfather and made a choice. He stayed. Imagine that scene, an old man and a young man inside a wooden house. Outside 1,000 men with rifles and torches screaming for blood, demanding they come out, demanding they pay for Will's so-called crime, demanding they die for being related to a black man who died innocent. French Godley shouted back through the walls, "We've done nothing wrong. This is our home." And then he and Pete did something that should be taught in every history book as an example of courage. They fought back. French Godley and Pete Hampton fired shots from inside the house. 2 men against 1,000. They knew they couldn't win. They knew they would die. But they refused to surrender. They refused to walk out and be lynched like Will. They refused to die begging. They chose to die fighting. And that choice, that moment of defiance, bought time for other families to run. The mob surrounded the house completely. They fired hundreds of rounds into the walls, bullets tearing through wood, shattering windows. Then they set it on fire. Torches thrown through broken windows, kerosene splashed on the walls, flames erupting from every side, smoke filling the rooms, heat becoming unbearable. And still French and Pete fought. Still they fired back, until the smoke choked their lungs, until the flames consumed the structure, until their bodies fell. French Godley and Pete Hampton died as warriors, not as victims. As warriors defending their home, their dignity, their humanity against impossible odds. That 70-year-old man could have begged for mercy. That 30-year-old could have run for safety. Neither did. They stood together. They fought together. They died together. And their sacrifice bought time. While the mob focused on that house, other families grabbed their children and ran. Ran through cornfields, ran through darkness, ran for their lives. But the mob wasn't finished. Not even close. From evening on August 19th, until noon on August 20th, 15 hours of continuous terror. They burned 4 more black homes, 5 total houses destroyed completely. They shot into windows of other black residences, shattered glass, destroyed property. They even fired at a train carrying passengers, bullets hitting the cars. Miraculously, nobody on the train died. But the message was clear, unmistakable: leave or die. Get out or burn. Some black residents tried to fight back. A few had rifles. They fired from windows, from doorways, trying to protect their families. But they were overwhelmed. 1,000 against 30 families. Military rifles against hunting shotguns. Organized mob against scattered civilians. It wasn't a battle. It was a massacre without the mass death, only because people ran. Let me give you the numbers. Numbers matter because they make this real. 1,000 plus armed white men. 300 black people forced to flee. 30 families expelled from their homes. 5 houses burned to ash. 4 people confirmed dead. 3 in the lynching and burning. Possibly more never documented. and $30 million in property value stolen. That's calculated in today's money. 30 acres of farmland plus 10 city lots. Gone. Taken. Stolen under threat of death. At 2 in the morning on August 20th, 300 people ran through cornfields. Mothers carried babies through darkness. Fathers guided children by hand. Elderly stumbled through fields they used to own. Some fled into nearby woods and hid for days. No food, no water, just terror and survival. Some ran 40 miles to Springfield, arrived barefoot, bleeding, traumatized. Some made it to Tulsa, to Kansas City, to Milwaukee, to Chicago, carrying nothing, leaving everything, their homes, their land, their churches, their community, their lives, all abandoned in one night, because staying meant death. Think about a mother running through cornstalks taller than her head, with a baby in her arms and bullets behind her. Think about an old man stumbling through fields he used to farm, watching his house burn in the distance. Think about children watching everything they knew disappear into flames and smoke and chaos, not understanding why people wanted them dead. No time to pack, no time to say goodbye, no time to grieve. Just run or die. And they ran. Because French Godley and Pete Hampton bought them time with their lives. Because they fought long enough for others to escape. That's what warriors do. They sacrifice so others can survive. By August 22nd, 4 days after Gazelle Wild's murder, Pierce City had 0 black residents. 0. Every single one of the 300 people were gone, never to return. Never. Not one family came back. Even black railroad porters who worked through town were forced to leave. The few who had good reputations, who white residents claimed to respect, even they had to go. The message was absolute. No black people allowed. Not the good ones. Not the quiet ones. Not the ones who stayed in their place. None. All gone. Forever. And then came the theft disguised as commerce. The organized robbery they called legal. Associated Press documented 9 black residents of Pierce City who lost property. 9 names on record. 30 acres of agricultural land plus 10 city lots. But we know the real number was higher. Many people fled so fast they never filed claims, never reported losses, never had their theft documented. But even the 9 we know about their losses were staggering. Let me tell you about Eviline Brinson. One name, one woman, one story that represents all the others. In 1889, Eviline Brinson bought a city lot in Pierce City for $96. She saved for that land. She worked for it. She owned it legally. Property deed in her name. And in 1901, after the massacre, she was forced to sell that lot to a white woman for $25. 25. She lost $71 on that single transaction. That's a 74% loss. In 12 years, her property should have increased in value. Instead, she sold at a massive loss. Why? Because she was selling under threat of death. Because white buyers knew black sellers had no choice, no leverage, no power. Sell cheap or die. That's not a free market. That's armed robbery legalized. Multiply Eviline Brinson's story by 30 families, 30 acres, 10 lots, homes, possessions, livestock, tools, businesses. Everything taken for pennies on the dollar or just taken outright. And this is the foundation of the wealth gap you live with today. This is why median white households have $188,000 in wealth, while median black households have $24,000. 8 times difference. That gap didn't happen because black people don't work hard. That gap exists because they stole everything your great-grandparents built and paid them nothing or next to nothing for it. Nobody was arrested for the Pierce City Massacre. Not one person out of 1,000. Not one trial. Not one conviction. Not one day in jail. They murdered 4 people minimum. They burned 5 homes. They terrorized 300 civilians. They stole 30 acres and 10 lots worth millions today, and faced 0 consequences. The newspapers reported it. Everyone knew. The governor knew. The federal government knew. And they did nothing. Actually, they did worse than nothing. They made it permanent. Pierce City became what's called a sundown town. You know what that means? It means black people were not allowed in town after dark. The sun goes down, you better be gone. That wasn't just social custom. That was enforced violently. Any black person caught in Pierce City after sunset risked being beaten or killed. And this wasn't unofficial. Everyone knew the rule. Everyone enforced it. From 1901 to 1960, Pierce City remained virtually all white. 60 years. Census data proves it. 1930 census showed 1,135 residents and 0 black people. 1960 census showed 1,006 residents and 1 black person. 1. And today, Pierce City is still 95% white. That's not coincidence. That's not preference. That's the result of ethnic cleansing that was never reversed, never reconciled, never repaired. An entire community erased. And the erasure lasted for generations. But here's what you really need to understand. What you really need to absorb. Pierce City was not an isolated incident. It wasn't one bad town having one bad night. Pierce City was one domino in a massive coordinated campaign of racial cleansing that swept across Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas, and Oklahoma. And when I show you the pattern, when you see how many times this happened, you'll realize this wasn't random violence. This was policy. This was systematic. This was genocide. You might be thinking, okay, Pierce City was horrible, but surely that was unusual, right? Surely that doesn't happen over and over. Wrong. Dead wrong. And I'm about to prove it to you with names and dates and numbers that will make you question everything you thought you knew about American history. Between 1894 and 1909, 15 years, 40,000 black people were expelled from southwest Missouri and northwest Arkansas. 40,000. That's not a riot. That's ethnic cleansing. That's the American ethnic cleansing they never taught you in school. They teach you about ethnic cleansing in other countries, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, but they never teach you it happened right here, in Missouri, in Arkansas, in the Ozarks. And I can prove it. Town by town, year by year, body by body. Let's start in Monett, Missouri, 1894, 7 years before Pierce City. Monett created the blueprint, the formula that would be repeated dozens of times. A black man was accused of a crime. The mob formed. They dragged him from jail and lynched him, hanged him from a telephone pole in the center of town for everyone to see. And then, this is the key part, they expelled all 200 black residents. Every single one. Forced them out at gunpoint. Told them never return. And just like that, Monett became all white. That lynching became known as the event that changed southwest Missouri. Because it worked. It proved that white supremacists could steal an entire community with 0 consequences. It showed that terror was effective, that violence paid, that genocide was profitable. And for the next 15 years, they repeated that formula in town after town after town. False accusation, lynching, burn homes, expel community, steal property, declare sundown town, move to next town, repeat. 7 years later, they did it in Pierce City, perfected the method, and they kept going. Harrison, Arkansas, 1905, October 2nd, A mob attacked the jail and seized 2 black prisoners, dragged them outside the city limits, beat them, told them to run and never come back. Then the mob swept through the black neighborhood. They tied black men to trees and whipped them publicly, burned homes, and ordered every black person to leave Harrison that night. That night, no time to pack, no time to plan, just go. Most fled to Fayetteville or Eureka Springs or Missouri towns. They left everything, homes, businesses, possessions, all abandoned under threat of death. But Harrison wasn't finished. They came back for round 2, January 1819, 4 years later. Charles Stinnett, a black man, was accused of raping a white woman. After his trial, a mob formed demanding a lynching. 10 days later, January 28th, the mob forced out the remaining black residents who had either returned or never left. All except one elderly woman called Aunt Vine, Electa Caledonia Melvina Smith. She stayed, everyone else gone, and the property of those who fled was declared confiscated, just taken, legally stolen by city decree. Harrison remained a sundown town until at least 2002, 100 years. And today, there's a Ku Klux Klan headquarters near Harrison. The legacy of that violence still exists, still shapes that town, still determines who feels safe there and who doesn't. Springfield, Missouri, Easter Sunday, April 15th, 1906. Easter Sunday, the most sacred day in Christianity. Resurrection Sunday, the day Jesus rose from the dead, the day Christians celebrate life and mercy and redemption. And white Springfield chose to lynch 3 black men. 3, on Easter. Then they expelled black residents from certain neighborhoods, because even on the holiest day, even on Resurrection Sunday, white supremacy mattered more than faith, more than Jesus, more than mercy. Do you see the pattern forming? Monett, Pierce City, Harrison, Springfield, same formula, same result, expulsion, theft, sundown town. But there's more, so much more. Joplin, Missouri had lynchings during this same period, 1894 to 1909, part of the same regional wave of terror. Mena, Arkansas, February 20th, 1901, same year as Pierce City. A mentally disabled black man accidentally injured a 12-year-old white girl. Accidentally, no intent, and the white community expelled the entire black population. Not just the man involved, everyone. Because one person's accident justified collective punishment, justified ethnic cleansing, and it continued for decades. St. Genevieve, Missouri, 1930, 30 years after Pierce City, white mobs forced black residents out en masse. 1930. That's not Reconstruction. That's not the 1800s. That's the Great Depression. That's when your grandparents were alive. That's living memory. The documented numbers are staggering. 5 major lynching events in southwest Missouri in just 12 years. 1894 to 1906. 40,000 black people fled the Ozarks due to violence. 40,000 human beings driven from their homes. And across America, thousands of sundown towns existed from 1890 to 1968. Thousands. Towns where black people legally could not live, could not stay overnight, could not even pass through safely after dark. Now do you see it? Now do you understand? This was coordinated. This was systematic. This was policy implemented through mob violence and government complicity. Let me break down the formula one more time so it's crystal clear. Step 1. Create a false accusation, usually rape or murder of a white woman. Doesn't matter if it's true. The accusation is the weapon. Step 2. Lynch the black man without trial. Public execution. Make everyone watch. Create fear. Step 3. Burn black homes while families sleep. or while they watch helplessly. Destroy the physical structures. Step 4. Terrorize the entire community until they flee. Not just the accused man's family, everyone. Step 5. Steal their land and property legally. Buy it for nothing. Claim abandonment. Forge deeds. Just take it. Step 6. Declare the town whites only. Make it a sundown town. Enforce it with violence. Step 7. Repeat in the next town. They did it in Monett. They perfected it in Pierce City. They spread it across Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas, Oklahoma, and beyond. Town by town after town. 40,000 black people gone. Billions of dollars in wealth stolen. Thousands of acres of land taken. Hundreds of businesses destroyed. Entire communities erased from existence. And for 100 years, it wasn't in a single textbook. Not one. 3 generations of Americans grew up never knowing this happened, never learning the truth, never understanding why black people distrust the system, never comprehending where the wealth gap came from. They buried this history deliberately, carefully, systematically. And now I'm going to show you exactly how they did it. How they made 40,000 people disappear from the historical record. How they turned genocide into footnotes. How they convinced America this never happened. Because the theft wasn't just physical. The theft wasn't just land and money and homes. The theft was memory itself. They stole the truth. And that might be the greatest crime of all. They did not just burn houses and lynch men. They built an entire machine to erase what they had done, to hide the crime, to make sure your grandparents would never know why their grandparents had to run through those cornfields in the middle of the night. The story of Pierce City is not just about what happened in those 15 hours of terror. It is also about what happened in the 120 years after. The long, slow, deliberate cover-up. The first layer of that cover-up was physical destruction. Fire is a weapon. But in Pierce City, fire was not only used to kill. It was used to wipe away evidence. 5 black homes burned to the ground. Not partly damaged, not slightly scorched. Gone. Ashes. When you burn a house in 1901, you are not just burning wood and glass. You are burning paper, deeds, titles, receipts, letters, family Bibles with names and dates written in the front. You are burning proof that these families existed, that they owned something, that they belonged there. Think about that in very practical terms. You own land. Your deed is in your house. You have your tax receipts, your bills of sale, your family records. A mob burns it all. You flee with nothing but the clothes on your back. 10 years later, 20 years later, your children try to prove that land was yours. They cannot. There is no paper, no document, no proof. The land is now in someone else's name, a white person's name. The county courthouse has their deed, not yours. And the law smiles and says, "Sorry, you have no evidence." Physical destruction was step 1. Kill the people who might speak. Burn the places that held their proof. In Pierce City, French Godley and Pete Hampton did not just die fighting. They died inside a burning house that contained whatever records they had. When that house collapsed, so did much of their paper trail. So did much of their legal claim. Multiply that across every black home in Pierce City, across homes in Monett, Harrison, Springfield, Mena, St. Genevieve, across Tulsa and Rosewood and Wilmington and Elaine. Fire as both terror and eraser. You see the same pattern in Tulsa in 1921. When white mobs destroyed 35 city blocks in Greenwood, they did not only kill around 300 black residents and burn 1,256 homes. They also destroyed property records, business ledgers, community archives. In Rosewood, Florida in 1923, they demolished the entire town. Churches, schools, houses, everything. There was nothing left for black survivors to return to, nothing to rebuild on, nothing to prove what had been there before the flames. Then came legal suppression. This is where it gets even more insidious, because they did not just commit crimes in the dark. They used the law in the light. They used courts and ordinances and unwritten rules to make the theft permanent. In Pierce City, after the mob did its work, the legal system did nothing. Not one of the roughly 1,000 men in that mob was arrested. Not one case brought. Not one indictment. That silence was a legal choice, a political choice, a moral choice. It told every white person in the region, you can do this. You can kill. You can steal. You can terrorize. And the law will protect you, not them. The law also helped lock in the new racial order. Pierce City became a place where everyone understood, without needing a written sign, that black people could not live there. It became a sundown town. If you are black, you do not remain in town after sunset. If you try, you risk your life. There might not be a formal ordinance on the books saying that. There often was no written statute. But there was what people called the unwritten law, and that unwritten law was enforced more brutally than any written one. A black person caught in town after dark could be beaten, jailed, or killed with no consequences for the attackers. This pattern appears across the country. Some towns did put it in writing. Places where city councils passed curfews specifically targeting black residents. Towns where signs went up at the edge of city limits. Variations of the same message. If you are black, do not let the sun set on you here. Entire counties issued resolutions that effectively banned black people from living within their borders. And when those people left, their property was often declared abandoned, taken over through tax sales, quietly transferred into white hands. You saw an example of legal suppression in the story of Eviline Brinson. She bought her land in 1889 for $96. After the massacre, she was forced to sell for $25. That sale had a deed. It looked legal. It sat in a courthouse as a clean transaction. 2 women, 1 black seller, 1 white buyer. Price agreed, paper signed. But you know the truth. That sale was not free. It was made under threat of mob violence, under the knowledge that staying meant death. The law called it a sale. Morality calls it robbery. This is how they used the legal system to wash the blood off their hands. They let the mob do the dirty work. Then they stepped in and gave the results a stamp of approval. Property records changed names. No mention of lynching. No mention of fire. Just neat lines in a ledger. On paper, everything looks normal. Just one owner selling to another. But behind each line in those books is a story of terror. And then, maybe the most effective tool of all, they erased these stories from education, from the official narrative, from what your children learn, from what you were taught. Think back to your own schooling. Did anyone ever mention Pierce City Monett Harrison? Did anyone tell you that 40,000 black people were forced out of the Ozarks in 15 years? That thousands of towns across America were sundown towns where black presence after dark was a death sentence? Most likely the answer is no. For decades, Tulsa was not taught in Oklahoma schools. The massacre of 1921, one of the most destructive racial attacks in American history, removed from textbooks. For 75 years, 3 generations grew up in that state having no idea that their grandparents had survived or committed mass murder in Greenwood. The same thing happened with Pierce City. Local history books skipped over it. Small mention at best. National history textbooks never included it. Instead, they gave you a sanitized story. Race relations were difficult. There were some riots. There were tensions. That soft language hides the reality. This was terrorism. This was racial cleansing. These were massacres. They also changed the words they used to describe these events. Words are powerful. Call something a massacre and people see victims. Call it a riot, and people assume both sides were at fault. That is exactly what many newspapers and officials did. They labeled these events race riots, as if black communities spontaneously decided to attack their own neighborhoods, as if white mobs did not initiate the violence, as if the destruction was mutual. They renamed massacres as disturbances, uprisings, conflicts. They framed white mobs as defending order. They framed black victims as troublemakers. And finally, they manipulated media coverage in real time. Look at how national papers reported these events. Neutral titles, passive language, the Missouri mob's work. Not white men murdered innocent black citizens. Not domestic terrorists burned homes and stole land. Just work, the work of the mob, presented without moral judgment, without outrage. Victims reduced to the word Negroes. Their stories flattened into statistics. Their humanity erased. Reporters focused on the alleged crimes of black men, but rarely questioned the accusations. They printed the mob's justifications without scrutiny. They echoed claims that communities were simply defending themselves. That order had to be restored. In doing so, they gave cover to the criminals. They turned genocide into community self-defense. They turned white terrorism into law and order. And over time, those headlines became the only written record many people ever saw. Now you might be asking, why does all this matter today? Why dwell on a town most Americans have never heard of? Why look back at 1901 when we have enough problems in 2025? Here's why. Because the consequences did not stay in 1901. They live in your bank account, in your neighborhood, in your job, in your health. The past is not past. The past is present. Let me bring this into your life in a very concrete way. Right now in the United States, the typical white household has about $188,000 in wealth. The typical black household has about $24,000. That is an 8-to-1 difference. 8 times. Same country, same economy, same time period. And people love to explain that gap with lies. They say it is because of hard work, because of culture, because of personal choices. That is nonsense. You just watched how Pierce City built its wealth, and how that wealth was stolen. You saw land ripped away at gunpoint, homes burned, business districts destroyed, people expelled. That wealth did not vanish. It changed hands. Imagine if those 30 acres and 10 lots had stayed in black hands. Imagine if those families had passed them down, first to their children, then to their grandchildren, then to you. Over 124 years, land appreciates, homes gain value, rent generates income, equity builds. Those 30 families could have become the foundation of a multi-generational black middle class in Pierce City. They could have sent children to college, started businesses, bought more land. Instead, that value fed white wealth. Picture a simple scenario. Each of those 30 lots and 30 acres starting out at modest values in 1901, growing with the town. By now easy to see each family sitting on $800,000 to $1.5 million in assets. That is not fantasy. That is standard property growth over time. 30 families with an average of 1 million, each equals 30 million in community wealth, just from one small Missouri town. Now imagine if those families had 3 children, and each of those children had 3 children. 30 families becomes 270, then 2,430 descendants alive today. 30 million divided by 2,430. That is roughly $12,000 per descendant. And that is a conservative estimate that does not include compounding investment growth or additional assets they could have bought. Now multiply that math across every place this happened: Tulsa, Rosewood, Wilmington, Elaine, Ocoee, Springfield, Monett, Harrison, Mena, St. Genevieve. Multiply it across 40,000 black people expelled from the Ozarks. Multiply it across thousands of sundown towns. Multiply it across generations of redlining, school segregation, wage discrimination, all layered on top of the initial theft. Are you seeing the picture yet? This is not about black people needing to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. This is about a system that stole the boots, stole the road, then blamed you for not walking fast enough. You have heard people say reparations is about slavery. They say slavery ended a long time ago. They ask, why should anyone pay today? But look at Pierce City. This happened in 1901, not 1801. 1901. Just over 120 years ago. Your great-grandparents were alive. Some of your grandparents were children. They grew up in the shadow of this terror, in the reality of sundown towns. Redlining did not end until 1968. That is your parents' lifetime. In some cases, your own lifetime. The theft is not ancient, it is ongoing. In Pierce City, we have names, we have dates, we have property records. We know 9 black residents documented as losing land and city lots. We know the names of some of them. We know what they paid. We know what they were forced to accept later. We know the houses burned to the ground. We know the city never compensated them. We know the county never compensated them. That is not vague grievance. That is specific theft, with receipts, with paper trails, with numbers. Reparations in cases like this is not a handout. It is repayment of a very clear debt. Think about how the government has handled other historical wrongs. Germany paid reparations to Holocaust survivors and their descendants. The United States paid reparations to Japanese Americans who were forced into internment camps during World War II. Nobody called those payments charity. Everyone understood they were owed. They were overdue. Pierce City and places like it deserve the same treatment. Documentary evidence exists. The debt is real. So when someone asks why black Americans talk about reparations, point them here. Point them to Pierce City, to Greenwood, to Rosewood, to every town where black wealth was systematically stripped and white wealth was built on its carcass. This is not theoretical. It is not emotional rhetoric. It is math. It is history. It is accounting. Now look at the world around you right now and tell me this pattern is over. Gentrification is modern land theft with a nicer accent. In 1901, they used fire and guns to push black families out and take their homes. Today, they use rent hikes, zoning decisions, and development plans. But the result feels eerily familiar. Longtime residents priced out, forced to move. Neighborhoods that once were black suddenly become trendy. Coffee shops appear, boutique stores, dog parks, property values skyrocket. And who owns the new buildings? Who captures the new wealth? Often not the families that lived there for generations. Mass incarceration is modern slavery in a suit and tie. In 1901, they invented accusations against men like Will Godley. Used those accusations to justify murder. Today, they use accusations, true or false, to justify locking people in cages. The 13th Amendment officially ended slavery, but it carved out an exception for those convicted of crimes. That exception became the foundation of a prison industry that profits off black bodies. You see young black men serving long sentences for nonviolent offenses, while corporations profit from their labor. You see communities policed like occupied territories, just like Oakland in the 1960s, when Black Panthers started policing the police. Police brutality is the modern echo of those mobs. A century ago, white citizens formed mobs. Today, the state often plays that role. Black people killed in their own beds, in their cars, on sidewalks, in front of their children. Officers rarely prosecuted. When their sentences are light. It feels a lot like 1901. Different uniforms, same impunity. History is not repeating itself exactly, but it is rhyming with the familiar tune. That is why this story matters right now. Because if you do not understand Pierce City, you will never fully understand why your grandmother always seemed nervous when she saw a police car. Why your grandfather told you not to travel certain roads at night. Why your parents told you to be home before dark in certain towns. You will never understand why your family rents instead of owns. Why your people are concentrated in certain neighborhoods. Why the wealth gap feels like a concrete wall. Now we have to talk about you. About who you are inside this story. Because if all you walk away with is anger and sorrow, then the cover-up still wins. The enemy wanted you to see yourself as a victim, as broken, as less. That is how this system has survived for centuries. It lies about your identity. It lies about your ancestors. It lies about your worth. The truth is very different. You are not a victim. You are a survivor. You come from people who faced genocide and refused to die. You come from warriors like French Godley, who stood his ground at 70 years old in front of 1,000 men and said with his actions, "I will not bow." You come from men like Pete Hampton, who chose to stand with his father instead of saving himself. You come from women like Eviline Brinson, who bought land in a world that told her she should own nothing. You come from 300 people who ran through bullets and fire and lived to rebuild. Your poverty is not a reflection of your character. It is not proof of laziness. It is not evidence that you failed. Your poverty is the smoke from houses burned in 1901. Your poverty is the echo of deeds stolen from charred ruins. Your poverty is the interest on unpaid debts stretching back 100 years. When you look at your bank account, you are not looking at the sum of your effort. You are looking at the result of theft, of systems designed to extract from you and your people. So say this to yourself out loud. I am not poor because I failed. I struggle because they stole from my ancestors. I am not worthless. I am owed. I am not broken. I am the evidence that their genocide failed. Your ancestors were not just survivors either. They were builders. They were owners. They were, in many cases, early millionaires in today's terms. When you hear about Black Wall Street, you know that Greenwood in Tulsa had more black millionaires per capita than almost anywhere in America before 1921. You know that black doctors, lawyers, store owners, and entrepreneurs created thriving ecosystems. Pierce City was smaller, but the principle was the same. Black families owned land, owned homes, owned businesses, built wealth in spite of everything. They did all of this while facing terrorism, while knowing at any moment a mob could form a noose, could be tied, a match could be struck, and they still built. That is in your DNA. The courage to build under threat, the strength to rebuild after loss, the determination to keep going when the world tells you to give up. That resilience is a gift from God. God preserved your people through the Middle Passage, through slavery, through Reconstruction betrayal, through Jim Crow, through Pierce City, through Tulsa, through the civil rights backlash, through mass incarceration, through police shootings. You are not here by accident. You are here by design. There is a reason you are hearing this story right now. There is a reason your heart is beating faster as you listen. There is a reason something in you is saying, "This is my story. This is my family. This is a divine appointment. A moment when truth meets destiny." God did not allow your entire bloodline to be wiped out in those fields in 1901. God did not allow every descendant of those 300 to disappear. Some of them survived. Some of them had children. Some of them had you. And now you are here listening, learning, waking up. So what do you do with that? How do you carry this truth? How do you honor it? How do you turn it into power instead of pain? First, you embrace a new identity. You stop calling yourself a victim of history and start seeing yourself as an heir to a powerful legacy. You are an heir to stolen land, stolen homes, stolen businesses, stolen millions. That is not to make you bitter. It is to make you clear, to make you focused, to make you bold when you talk about justice and reparations. You are not begging for scraps. You are claiming what is rightfully yours. Second, you cultivate pride in your ancestors. Not the shallow pride that ignores suffering. The deep pride that says my people suffered and built anyway. My people were hunted and created anyway. My people were terrorized and worshipped anyway. You tell these stories to your children. You tell them about French Godley, about Pete Hampton, about 300 runners in the night, about land bought by Eviline Brinson, about homes burned and still hearts unbroken. You let your children know they carry warrior blood, that their existence is proof that the system failed to erase them. Third, you step into purpose. You realize that God did not preserve this story for nothing, that the uncovering of this history in our time is not random. It is part of a larger awakening, an unveiling, a judgment on systems that have lied for centuries. Your role in that is not to just absorb information. It is to become a keeper of truth, a carrier of memory, a voice that refuses to let these stories be buried again. In a few minutes, we are going to talk about exactly what you can do, how you can act, how you can join a movement that demands reparations, that pushes for memorials, that forces cities like Pierce City to acknowledge what they did, that protects Black neighborhoods today from becoming the next Pierce City through gentrification and police violence. Before that, we need to pause and do something important. If this truth is hitting you, if you feel anger rising or tears, or a deep sense of recognition, if you are realizing you were lied to your whole life about what this country did to your people, then lean into that. Let it move you to action. If this story opened your eyes, comment the word truth below. Just that one word, truth. Let the world see how many people are waking up. Hit the like button if you are done with the lies they taught you in school. If you are tired of history books that sanitize genocide. If you want platforms to push this story to more people. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. A cousin who always wondered why your family left the South. An elder who told you pieces of a story but never had all the facts. A friend who thinks the wealth gap is about laziness. They need to see this. You are not just watching a video. You are participating in an act of resistance. Every comment, every share, tells the algorithm show this to more people. Show this to people who have never heard the name Pierce City. Show this to people who question reparations. Show this to people who still believe America has always been fair. You are part of this story now. The question is, what will you do with it?